Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're with us. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. The listen line, 605-477-3249. Mackenzie's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. With us today, hour number one, Dr. Joel Wallach. Welcome, Dr. Wallach.
Well, thank you, Vincent. I always appreciate your hospitality. It's always good to be with you, sir.
It's great to be with you, Dr. Wallach. And I'm still scratching my head, and I'll tell you why. So, this morning, I went in the kitchen, and we had a visitor bright and early. And so I said to our visitor, who is between 70 and 80 years old, I said to him, "So, are you still on insulin?" And he said, yeah. I said, "Okay. Well, in a few minutes, we have an instructor who can fix this. Type 2, right? Type 2 diabetes, right?" He said, yeah.
That's
okay,
true.
We can fix this. We might be able to fix this in 30 days. Yeah.
No problem.
And so I said, would you like to talk with him? And he kind of looked at me, and I said, we can do this. And he said, well, so all you're going to have to do is, the big thing is supplements and change your diet. That's going to be, that's it. And he said, well, I really love to eat. And I said, yeah. He said, and I really love to eat. And so Mrs. Finelli kind of nudges me. You've been in our kitchen. I was standing by the island. She kind of nudges me behind the island. It's like, knock it off. I'm like, okay. So I'm still scratching my head. Come on. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure you've heard it. It just happened to me again. I don't get it.
Yeah, I see it and hear it thousands of times a month, Vincent. And of course, when I said, well, here's your option. You can supplement and change your diet, as you've said. And you just take your fasting blood sugar every morning before you medicate yourself. And as your blood sugar drops, you do what your doctor told you. You reduce your medication. Your blood sugar goes up, you take more. And just like your doctor told you. Our goal is to get you down below 100, using American numbers, get you below 100 of your blood sugar without medication. And this is very commonly done within 30 to 60 days. It's based on an enormous amount of basic research. We know that type 2 diabetes is not a genetic disease. It's a simple nutritional deficiency. And people have been lied to and told that it's one of these pre-existing conditions you just have to treat forever. That's nonsense. And when you tell people this, remember, this guy's 80 years old, and his belief system is 80 years old, and you're crossing his belief system, and I get so many answers and questions, Vincent, like, well, I have to ask my doctor first. Well, wait a minute. You've had your feet amputated. You're on 14 prescription drugs for complications of diabetes. You're blind. How's the doctor's treatment been working for you? He says, well, I'm still alive. Okay, so you're prepared to take a low quality of life rather than be 80 years old chronologically and be biologically 18. Why would you not want to do that? And, the cost is less than half of the cost of a cup of exotic coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm so frustrated. Literally, I am so frustrated. And it's even worse than that. I learned that one of our friends was near death, and he had some tumors. And I placed a call, and you and I were on the phone, and we had an answer for him. And Brandy Brogdon, who's been on the air with us, your assistant, was on, and so we were all ready to make this happen. And I sent him as quickly as I could. That day, I sent him your recommendations, and one of them happened to be Beyond Tangy Tangerine. So I got that to him immediately. And I got on the phone with him, and the answer was, you know what? Unless you can absolutely guarantee that this is going to save my life, unless you're absolutely sure and you can provide bona fide, what would you call them? Bona fide case studies where this has absolutely positively worked. I'm not interested.
Well, now you know how
I'm still frustrated. Yeah. Yes. And I'm so frustrated. Now, on the other hand, there are those who listen to us. We have a neighbor who comes over and he brings us fresh vegetables, and he grows a fabulous garden, and he uses what we do, wood ashes in the garden. So it's the right way to do it. And we give him Beyond Tangy Tangerine, and we give him de-stress. And when I ask him, how's it working? He'll smile. And once he said to me, I don't know. And I said, well, stop taking it. And you'll see. and so he is religious about taking the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and the de-stress. And class, I do too, and so does my mom. And Dr. Wallach mentioned to me years ago, I told him about my mom and CHF, congestive heart failure. And he said he could fix that. We'll just change give her some supplements because she eats really well. She's had for years and years, decades. And it's fixed. She's in her mid-90s, and she gets around. She goes to the garden. She travels with us. And, she's here at the farm. So I'm here to tell you that she is of both sides of our family, my father's side and my mother's side, she has survived the longest and has been the healthiest, and she's still going strong. So I just wanted to tell you, thank you. It works. But it's also frustrating because there are those who I absolutely positively know we can help, but they don't want it. They don't want our help.
Yeah, well, you have a better scorecard than most. You got 50%. Half the people are doing it, and half choose to stick with the original plan, which is the medical system. And, of course, this is why the rates of insurance go up and why the pre-existing condition situation is breaking the government and causing personal bankruptcies. Because people are afraid to change what they're doing. And they look and say, well, I've been on this medication for 8 years. I'm still alive. And many people who didn't take the medication are dead. And so I'm just afraid to change. And you can appreciate where they're coming from. And so you give them the information, and everybody makes their choices. And so it comes down to you're going to save some. You're not going to save everybody. And so we're looking for those few who really want to make a difference, not only for themselves, but their families. And the thing that gets me, Vincent, is that the experts from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the federal agency that tracks this stuff, are telling us that our children will be the first generation of Americans that do not live as long as their parents. And we spend more money for health care than all the nations of the world combined, and yet our children are not going to live as long as us. Most Americans will be burying their kids. And so I wonder what Steve Jobs' parents felt like when they buried him at age 56. Arturos Iwata, the CEO of Nintendo, was 55. I wonder what his parents thought when they buried him at age 55. And that's because they're very smart, they're very rich, but they didn't take the 90 essential nutrients, and they falsely believed if they just ate well, hired the top organic chef, and spent $1,000 a meal, that they would get everything they needed. Well, they were wrong. It cost them their lives. And so no matter how rich you are, no matter how fit you are, no matter how politically connected you are, no matter how smart you are, if you don't give your body the basic stuff it needs, you're going to cut your life short, and even worse, the time you do have will be miserable and expensive.
You mentioned Steve Jobs. When I lived in California, and we had a startup company out there in Silicon Valley, we could see him walking around Los Gatos. Handsome. He just looked like the epitome of success. He really carried himself that way. Our law firm was the same law firm that Apple Computer used. So, we had some of the same members of the circle of friends, if you will. And he had it all. And then if you looked at him then, in the 80s, and then you looked at him toward the end of his life, he was no longer that handsome epitome of health that he was. And as you said, he had all the money to buy whatever he wanted, including the best advice, if that's what he wanted, the best food, the best supplements, the best of everything. And he died of pancreatic cancer. You're absolutely right.
That's correct.
And
so he chose poorly. It was a decision he made poorly. And, of course, the reason why we have skyrocketing cancer, skyrocketing obesity, diabetes, skyrocketing Alzheimer's disease, skyrocketing arthritis, back problems, lupus, all these things, is not genetics. It's not things like autoimmune. It's just simply we don't have the nutrients in our food that are necessary to prevent and cure these diseases. They're all nutritional deficiency diseases, and people would just get off the bad foods and supplement with the 90 essential nutrients, 60 minerals. See, plants only need 3 elements from the soil, Vincent, to do well and make good seeds for the next generation. All vertebrates, including human beings, require 60 nutrients from the soil. And if you're eating the very best organic food, you're 57 nutrients short right out of the chute. And so because we're not putting wood ashes in the garden anymore, we're not fertilizing with silt from the floodplains anymore, and they're just using the Monsanto and the Dow chemical fertilizers, NPK, the 3 nutrients that plants require, NPK. And those are fine. We need them, but we need the other 57, and they're not in the food. So unless you supplement, you're putting yourself in extreme risk, almost 100%, predictable as gravity. You're going to get these diseases. And so, people would not put dirt from Texas in their car. People would not put 6 quarts of dirt from Texas in their car at 50 cents a quart instead of 6 quarts of oil to save a few bucks, and hope that there's oil in that dirt because it's from Texas. I mean, an insane person wouldn't do that to their car. And that's what they do to themselves instead of guaranteeing they're going to take all 90 essential nutrients by supplementing. I'll just eat well. My doctor said I can just eat well. And then they don't.
Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. I'm going to give you the order hotline, 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. We'll be right back. That's Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. Dr. Wallach, I took a call off the air. There was a lady who had a question, but she did not want to be on the air. So I said, okay, well, we'll call you back, and we'll call you back off the air. So, class, if you want to call in and you want us to call you back, I'm going to give you that number. Now, you will not be on the air with this number. This is the protocol order hotline for the kinds of products that Dr. Wallach and I are discussing. Here's that number, 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. Okay, Dr. Wallach, you'd mentioned the analogy with the car and the potential for the possibility of having oil from Texas in that dirt from Texas. And so here's the analogy that I was thinking as you were talking about this. So we have automobiles and light trucks, and we drive them. And let's say that these vehicles were self-tuning. They could tune themselves up. And they could repair themselves automatically, unless you have a major crash, okay? If you drive it into a tree at a high rate of speed, well, it can't fix itself. But if we had a vehicle that was self-analyzing, self-tuning, self-repairing, that's kind of what we're talking about with our body. But there are a couple things that we have to do. Number one, we can't put bad fuel in it. We can't put contaminated fuel in it and expect it to run properly. And we have to have the right additives. So if we have the right additives and the right fuel, our vehicles will self-tune, self-repair, self-analyze, right? Isn't that what we're talking? Isn't that it?
You're exactly right, Vincent. And of course, this is what our genes, DNA, RNA, and telomeres do, is they're blueprints, and they're designed to maintain us by replacing dead cells. All of our cells and tissues and organs and systems die. Some die daily. Red blood cells live to be 120 days old, and that sort of thing. Our skin dies on a regular basis. Everybody knows your skin replaces itself constantly. Well, that's true of every cell type and every tissue type and every organ in the body. But it requires raw materials to do this because the genes, DNA, RNA, and telomeres are just blueprints. They can't make things without the raw materials. So we're obligated to give them the raw materials in optimal amounts. And I call this like putting oil in your car before the engine burns up. Nobody waits until the engine burns up to put oil in the car. You put oil in the car, you change it every 1,000 miles. You have a certain quality of oil based on the maintenance manual that comes with the vehicle. And that's what you do to get your 300,000, 500,000 miles out of your vehicle before you have to change the engine. That's what you can expect. And the same thing is true in human beings. If we give ourselves everything that our cells need, 16 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids, and stay away from the bad foods, fried foods, processed meats, oils, and glutens, wheat, butter, and oat, then our bodies can do its job. We will get much more out of it. And, of course, when you look at the top 20 longevity cultures, according to the National Geographic, they have 40 times the 100-year-olds we Americans do. You remember, Vincent, we spend more money for health care every year than all the 207 nations registered in the United Nations, and we only rank 43rd when it comes to longevity. There's 42 other nations who live longer than us. In the top 20, they have 40 times the 100-year-olds we do. They have 100-year-old per 250 of their population. We only have 1 per 10,000. And it's because we're not paying attention to the details. We get lots of calories and lots of protein. And when you look at these multiples on the market, you can get over-the-counter or through TV ads, you get 6, 8, 9, 10 minerals, and you need 60. We're going to get the other 50. You're certainly not going to get them from the food. You'll get 3 more from the food, so now you're up to, say, 13 minerals, and that means that you're 57 short. And so we're in real trouble here, and that's why we have actually epidemics of, again, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, arthritis, liver cirrhosis, fatty livers. Our little kids are 3 years old are getting fatty livers and need liver transplants because we don't have these nutrients in our food. And a 100-year study by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which came out in 2015, it was started in 1915, a 100-year study, the U.S. Department of Agriculture said that 95% of all Americans are seriously minerally deficient because our soils have become 85% deficient in minerals since April 1915, become 85% deficient in minerals, and plants can't make them. Plants can make vitamin C. Plants can make beta-carotene, which is converted to vitamin A if you have enough of the right minerals. And so we're really on the short shrift here unless you supplement. You must supplement. There's no other way.
Dr. Joel Wallach's with us. Class, let me give you that protocol order hotline again. 417-863-7149. 417-863-7149. Yeah, and Dr. Joel Wallach is with us, broadcasting this hour. Dr. Wallach, I would consider that a number of us are warriors at USA Prepares, you, me included. And I believe that as warriors, we look at the long run. You've mentioned automobile analogies and, hundreds of thousands of miles on our engines and vehicles. And I was thinking, I drive a diesel car. It's got easily 250,000 miles on it. We've got a diesel truck right outside the studio window. It's got 340,000 miles on it. I've got a tractor that has over 5,000 hours on it. I've got another tractor with 3,500 hours on the hour meter, and that hour meter stopped 15 years ago. And, we use that all the time. So I'm thinking about being a warrior and maybe, is it genetic makeup that we have that, and the reason I mentioned the tractors and the vehicles is because anyone who would buy vehicles like that and have that many miles on them is looking at protecting them, defending them, maintaining them so that they last as long as possible. Now, is there a genetic thing that relates to us being warriors and looking at the long run?
Well, I wouldn't call it a genetic thing. I would call it an epigenetic thing, Vincent. And the science of epigenetics is rapidly replacing genetics. So things we think of as being genetic, like intelligence and strength and speed and size and longevity, these things are all actually controlled by what you eat, what you don't eat, what supplements you get, what supplements you don't get, because you can have the best genes in the world. But if you don't give them what they need to do, they're going to do nothing because they're just a blueprint. And so the concept of genetics being control of everything is quite wrong. Again, you have the best genes in the world. Now, I used to wonder why those little Ethiopians are 5 foot tall, weigh 90 pounds, they'd win all those marathons in the Olympics. And our guys, 6'8", big long-distance runners, they come in 5 miles behind, puffing and puffing and fall over the line. These little bitty Ethiopians are just laughing and doing somersaults when they get to the finish line. What's going on? Well, those little Ethiopians are still living very primitively. They're still putting wood ashes in their gardens and are getting minerals that way put into their garden, because wood ashes are really 95 to 90% minerals. You may have a little bit of unburned carbon, so they look gray or black, but wood ashes is, well, it's an incorrect term, because that powder that we call wood ashes is really the minerals that the tree has sucked up out of the ground. You burn the wood for fuel. The powder that's left of the minerals, you throw them in the garden. The plants, even though they only need 3, they will suck up anything that's soluble, good or bad. And so when they suck up these extra minerals, they do appreciate it, and they do give us a bigger yield. You grow faster, much higher yield. But when we eat them, unknowingly, we're getting these minerals. Well, when you fertilize the plants with a commercial fertilizer from Monsanto or Dow Chemical Company, the plants look good. They'll have good seeds for the next generation, but they only have 3 elements in them. And that's why we're not getting what we need to get, because people are tired. They wear out. They get obesity, diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, things of that nature, because they're not getting the nutrients they need, and plants don't need them. Plants cannot make them. So we must consciously replace all those wood ashes that we gave up years ago in exchange for electricity. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
I happen to be the designated driver to shuttle someone to an appointment, to a medical appointment. So I was at the hospital in the waiting room yesterday, and I was looking around, and I'm seeing these people who could hardly move. They're just shuffling along, and I'm thinking, this doesn't need to be like this. And I think that there are I'm thinking that there are people who are working in the highest levels of government that are cheering this on, saying this is wonderful, because just think of all the Social Security funds that we're going to be saving, because these guys aren't going to make it much longer.
Well,
it's unacceptable, and I know this could...
That's certainly one of the thoughts. But the other thought is that these people are going to be on Social Security for another 10, 15 years, and of course we have to then tax more so we can get taxes for their favorite little project, which are sort of add-ons or tack-on tails to the bills that are getting passed to meet the needs of these people with these pre-existing conditions. That's our problem, these pre-existing conditions. For instance, again, let's go back to type 2 diabetes. You may have type 2 diabetes for 20, 30, 40 years. You can sort of manage the blood sugar, but you're going to get all these complications. You eventually die from the complications of type 2 diabetes. But you've been in the system, and you've paid the system for 20, 30, 40 years. Well, you do our program. You get rid of the bad food. You get on the 90 essential nutrients with what we call the secret sauce, that one nutrient that's missing when you have type 2 diabetes. And in weeks, your diabetes is gone, and you're out of their system. And suddenly now you don't need them anymore, for $4 or $5 a day, depending on your body weight, half the cost of an exotic cup of coffee per day. And not only are you going to get the benefit for your diabetes, which is your pre-existing conditions that's driving your whole life and making you go see the doctor and getting your prescriptions and so on, but also because the other 89 essential nutrients in there, you're preventing 900 different diseases that still plague human beings, because all those 900 different diseases we've eliminated in the animal industry with just simple nutritional supplementation, and they exist in humans because we're not getting these nutrients in our food anymore. The agricultural industry is a lot smarter than the medical system, because they put these nutrients in the animal feeds to maximize production of meat, milk, and eggs, but also to eliminate all birth defects. No farmer wants to feed 100 cows and have 30 calves born with cleft palates and spina bifida and Down syndrome and 5 legs and heart defects and those kind of things, when just for a couple of bucks a day, 100 of those 100 calves will be perfectly normal. Well, most women do not take prenatal vitamins until they miss 2 or 3 periods. Well, the embryo is already damaged. We wind up with these kids with all these terrible birth defects, which turn out to be pre-existing conditions, because many of them you cannot reverse because the pieces are missing. pieces are missing because the mom didn't have the nutrients necessary on hand when those parts of the embryo were forming. And so they were simply omitted in the assembly plan. And so we have to start getting our young kids from before they're conceived, all through the pregnancy that they're developed in from the moment they're born, until 10 years after they die. And people say, what? Why give vitamins and minerals 10 years after somebody dies? Well, because I don't know what the percentage is, but it's very high. When a doctor or an EMT declares you dead, no pulse, no blood pressure, sorry, gone, dead, by the time they get you to the morgue, you've woken up and walked out. They can't even diagnose you correctly between life and death. And so we have a problem here. So we do have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our kids so that when they have kids, our grandkids, they'll be perfectly normal. And that's our responsibility because the doctors have failed us terribly there. We have so many birth defects of all kinds, and it's the fault of the OBGYN because they don't actually stress the need to take the 90 essential nutrients for a minimum of 6 months before pregnancy occurs. And they say, oh, just, wait till you get pregnant, we'll start on some prenatal vitamins. And most women say, well, I missed one period, but, who knows, I had a lot of stress. And then the next month, I missed a period, and, I can't get in to see the OB-GYN for a month. And so now you've missed 3 periods without taking the vitamins and minerals, and you are pregnant, and the embryo is suffering.
It jogged my memory when you mentioned the word stress. And I was thinking, how many people have jobs that they really are not crazy about, but they go to them so they can pay the mortgage note, pay the interest charges and so forth on their credit cards. Stress. How much of this stress can be handled better if we are healthy and we have the right amount of nutrition in our diet and we supplement properly? Are we better off and better able to handle the vigors and the stress of modern life?
Oh, absolutely. You get rid of the bad foods, take that pressure off of you, all the inflammatory foods, all the oxidative foods, again, fried foods, processed meats, oils, and gluten, wheat, butter, and others. Get rid of those foods out of your life. That'll, allow you to deal with stress much better. Then you throw in the 90 essential nutrients, 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids, and you're going to give all your body parts of your brain, your adrenal glands, your liver, your muscles, your gastrointestinal tract, all the things that are involved in helping you survive stress and even flourishing under situations of stress. Stress should roll off your back like water off a duck's back. If everything's okay from the standpoint of eliminating the bad foods and taking in all the good things, all 90 essential nutrients, which every cell in your body requires to defend itself against stress and other things, stress and pollution and you name it. Well, again, our adrenal glands cannot produce the fight or flight stress hormones without these nutrients. One of the nutrients you require to produce the hormones in your adrenal glands to survive stress and flourish under moments of stress, or days and times and months and years of stress, are eggs. People need to be eating 6 to 8 eggs per day per 100 pounds of body weight because the adrenal hormones that protect you from stress are 95% by weight cholesterol. When you go on a cholesterol-restricted diet and you're taking statin drugs to lower your cholesterol, you're not taking in your 90 essential nutrients, you cannot make your adrenal hormones, you get what's called adrenal exhaustion. You sleep 10 hours, you get up in the morning, you can't even I can't get out of bed. I still feel like I haven't had any sleep, and I was sleeping 10 hours. That's because your adrenal glands cannot make the hormones they're supposed to protect you from stress and prevent stress from having any kind of long-term effect on you because those hormones are 95% by weight cholesterol. And so anybody who doesn't eat 8 to 10 eggs a day per 100 pounds of body weight, for instance, last night, I had a great steak and 4 eggs. This morning, I had 4 eggs and baked sweet potato with butter. If you have low dairy fat, in other words, drinking skim milk, eating low-fat cheese, eating non-dairy coffee creamers, you're going to create adrenal exhaustion and Parkinson's disease. It's been shown in a study of 128,000 people with low dairy fat, you're going to get Parkinson's disease and adrenal exhaustion.
Dr. Wallach's with us. Rose, stand by. You're on next with Dr. Joel Wallach. We'll be right back. Dr. Wallach, during the commercial break, I picked up the phone and I called one of our instructors who has Parkinson's. And she's been on the air with you. And you recommended eggs. And you said Parkinson's a few minutes ago. And you mentioned eggs. So I picked up the phone, I called her, and I said, eggs. Eggs, 8 to 12 a day. And you can have them for breakfast and you can have them for dinner. 8 to 12 a day. So I just wanted to remind her that that is something that you recommended. Was that the right thing, Dr. Wallach?
Oh, yeah. To prevent things like Parkinson's disease, MS, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, Huntington's disease, these are all essentially the same diseases. It's just by random chance what part of the brains are more afflicted by the damage. You get different symptoms, and so they call it different names. But really, the approach is the same.
Mm-hmm. And she is... Go ahead.
How much does she weigh? How old is she?
She probably weighs around 130, and she's in her 60s.
Okay. Well, you got to get rid of all the bad foods. That's a prerequisite. No fried foods, no processed meats with nitrates, nitrites. Absolutely no oils, no olive oil, coconut oil, margarines, mayonnaise, sausages, cooking oils. No gluten, no wheat, no barley, rye, no oats. Of course, we have the go foods in that area. There's the 25-year shelf life, so we're very proud of that. But also, she needs to eat a minimum of, she has Parkinson's disease, I'd have her take a minimum of 8 to 10 eggs a day. They have to be soft poached with a soft yolk to protect the cholesterol. They can be soft boiled with a soft yolk, again, to protect the cholesterol. They can be soft scrambled in butter, not oils or margarines. And if you can eat your scrambled eggs with a fork, they're too hard. You have to be able to only eat them with a spoon. They're going to be really runny. That's the way you need to do it. And then you take your 90 essential nutrients. I like the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. 1 per 100 pounds of body weight, so she weighs 130. I'd have her take 1 Healthy Brain and Heart Pack a month. I'd also, have a half a dose of everything twice a day. I'd also have her throw in the Synaptive. She'd take 2 of those tablets twice a day. That's 2 bottles a month. The De-Stress capsules, she could take 3 of those twice a day. That'd be 2 bottles a month. And it wouldn't hurt for her to eat butter, drink a glass of whole milk twice a day. She can have a shake made with whole milk or heavy whipping cream. We have a wonderful bone broth shake. It's called a fit shake. And she could throw whole milk or whole cream in there and make it, instead of with water, make it with a heavy whipping cream. There's a wonderful study that just came out. 128,000 people who had Parkinson's disease, and these people were consciously all on a low-fat diet. And when it came to dairy fats, they were using skim milk and zero-fat milk and zero-fat yogurts and margarines instead of butter and cream and whole milk. And then the people same type of people, the control group, 128,000 people that didn't get Parkinson's disease, were all eating a high-fat dairy product. And so I have a new CD out here, Vincent. It's called A Stick of Butter a Day Keeps the Doctor Away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was a failed theory. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's really a stick of butter a day keeps the doctor away. And it goes over in that CD many diseases you get when you're deficient in fats, including Parkinson's disease, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is another one that's totally preventable, totally reversible. It's not a genetic disease. It's not a disease of aging. It's actually a physician-caused disease by them giving people the wrong information, which was to avoid cholesterol and saturated fat, eat more polyunsaturated things, which were inflammatory and caused plaque in the arteries and actually contributed to more Alzheimer's disease. Everything they did was wrong, and of course the people paid for it with shorter lives, miserable lives, cost them more money to be in these nursing homes when they were diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so we have to take over, and of course that's why we have the books and the CDs and our events, and I really enjoy all your Peppers events that you put on. They're just fabulous, and I'll look forward to the next one.
Dr. Wallach, you mentioned butter, and I think we have 8 cases of butter in the freezer. 8 cases. So we're there. Rose, I am so sorry we ran out of time, but I've got your number, and we will call you and get you all set up with Dr. Wallach's protocols. I called Jim during the break, and he's going to call you. So expect that phone call, and we're going to take care of you right away. Dr. Wallach, thank you so much for being with us and helping our class, our instructors, and those who are willing to take control of their own lives and become the best they can be.
Thank you, Vincent, for your great hospitality as usual. And thanks to all of your wonderful listeners and followers. Just love being part of the Prepper family. God bless you and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wallach. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? You're listening to Mackenzie's favorite broadcast, USAPrepares.com. With us this hour, I thought I'd get Mackenzie in trouble because he is engineering both this broadcast and Josh Tolley. So I thought I'd mention that he's engineering his favorite broadcast with us right this second. Thank you, Mackenzie. Kyle Harris is with us, and we're going to be talking about do-it-yourself wiring for your homes, how to do it right, how to save some money, and what you need to know about wiring outlets, receptacles, sub-panels, things to think about. Welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, Vince.
Hey, good morning, Kyle. So Kyle Harris lives off-grid in Montana. Kyle, would you mind sharing with us a little bit of the kinds of experience that you've had in the electricity field? Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, sure. I started out about 38 years ago, something like that, as an apprentice. I was union trained. Still, some of the best training I think you can get is the IBEW. I don't agree with them, of course, politically, but because they tend to always support the Democratic, people. But they do have some of the best training, in my opinion, that I've seen. And I went through a regular 4-year apprenticeship and turned out as a journeyman, and I've done everything from wire houses to I worked at a dam for a while, and we were able to make this dam able to be remote controlled, all 4 generators by either microwave tower or fiber optic from Grand Coulee Dam in Washington. And the dam I was working on is over here in Montana. Worked on that. So real complicated type stuff. And then, where you'd have boards that, one board would be, 12 feet long and 4 feet high and full of switches and control mechanisms to turn on and off everything that's going on, logic controllers and things like that. I've done a lot of different things over the years.
That's great. You mentioned fiber optics. I built a fiber optic network for a county government, and I designed a microwave communication system and installed it as well, and configured it and so forth, and built it turnkey. And so I've had some of the similar experiences that you've had. And you mentioned IBEW class. That stands for International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And that's a union shop. And what you talked about, Kyle, the progression through learning, training, and then ultimately, working under someone and then going on your where you're in charge. That's a really great way to go. That's the old way of doing things, and I fully subscribe to that, because right now children seem to think that they should start out being president, and they have very little clue as to what's really happening. So I applaud you for taking it's not the easy path, but it's the best path, in my opinion. Kyle, I want to talk about several things today. One, and I thought we could talk about electrical outlet boxes. They're not all the same. And when I was building our farmhouse here in Missouri, I could go to the big box store. We'll call it Lowe's. We'll call it Home Depot. And you could buy an electrical outlet box. They're blue, made by a company called Carlon, Carlon. And you could get them for about 18 cents. And there are 2 nails that are attached to them, and you can pound them into the studs, and then they work great, except they're small. They're small. Now, for a few more cents, maybe 30 cents, 31 cents, you could get instead of an 18 cubic inch little box, you could get one that would be a little larger. You could fit the wires in a little easier. You could bend them a little more gently, and you'd have a little more airspace in there to work around. And after trying the small ones that were inexpensive, I decided that I'd rather have the bigger ones. And they work so much better. And yeah, Well, last week I was finishing up some of the wiring that has been not finished in our farmhouse for 12 years. And I'd like to share with you what I do, and I'd love to hear your comments. I prefer the slightly larger boxes, and let's say 22 cubic inches or more. And I like the ones with the nails. They work great for new work. But I like to leave the wires inside the box a little bit longer than everybody else. And there's several reasons why. Number one is if I have longer wires, I can make hooking up let's say the switches or the receptacles, it's easier. I like to strip the wires to the appropriate length, bend the wires with a pair of pliers that's designed for that purpose around the screw, and I like to screw them in tightly. And I don't strip the wires and stick them in through those holes in the back where you don't use the screws. I don't like that. I don't think that's a good connection for the long run. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I like leaving the wires longer, maybe 8 inches. 8 inches long, so that I can fold them gently back into the box. And later on, if I have to do more work in that box and have to cut off the ends and restrip them, I've got enough wire to do that. That's why I like to do it that way. What are your thoughts, Kyle?
Exactly, Vince. That's I say exactly the way I do things. It's really funny. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, it's like we're reading from the same book or something. I people don't realize that if you take those wires, strip them, and just plug them into that little hole, if you look in that little hole, you're going to see a little tiny piece of metal that's sort of like spring-loaded, and it's a wedge, basically. And when you stick the wire in there, that little tiny sliver of this wedge is pressed up against the wire, and that is your connection. And if you hook something to that'll pull quite a few amps over a longer period of time, that connection gets hot, creates oxidation, and can cause a fire. So I'm with you. I totally, I always use a pair of needle nose, and I'll just pliers, and I'll just twist them around and tighten them onto the screw lugs, and that's the way I like it. And then I also leave mine probably close to 8 inches out there, and then I make sure that when I stuff them back in the box, I bend the wires so that they follow a collapsible program, so to speak. They are like an accordion. They go up and down and up and down, and I like them kind of stuffed back in there so that everything is out of the way. And if I ever have to go into that box again, I can take the 2 screws out, and then things come out almost like an accordion. It just extends right on out. That's the way I like to do it, because it's sure, I might not ever see this house again, but I've seen guys go into houses where I've been in behind them and coming in having to fix things or check things out, and good grief, they left 4 or 5 inches is all. And I mean, if you're down in behind a couch or a console of some sort, and you're having to work back behind there, and you're dealing with short wires, it's just not worth the struggle,
Total agreement, Kyle. As a matter of fact, within the next few days, I'm going to be visiting one of our instructors who I'm helping with his farmhouse, and he had a contractor come in and wire it. And every single box I open up, I can't believe how poorly the wiring was done. And every one that I open up, I take all the wires out, I start over from scratch, restrip them, retwist them, put new wire nuts. I don't like the wire nuts he used. I don't like the tape he used. I don't like the way I don't like anything about what he did. Not even the brand of these switches and receptacles, which are Hubbell brand. Now, Hubbell. Now, that's a top quality brand, except they switched to Chinese manufacturing. And I don't like their new stock. Now, I can't say that I've had a lot of experience. I just don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way it feels. And I don't want to have Chinese outlets in my house. I just don't want to. What? Well, I specifically seek a brand that I like. It used to be called Cooper. They've been purchased by Eaton, Eaton, and yes, you can still buy them. And so a few weeks ago, we found a location that sells Eaton brand, and I like Eaton because the switches feel good, the screws are good, they have a greater contact area, the ears, if you will, on the switches and receptacles. They're about 40% more metal there that contact the sheetrock for a firmer installation. I really like Cooper and Cooper/Eaton, and they stand behind their products. So I like that. And they're made not in China. The ones I buy are made either in Mexico or the United States, and I'm happy with that. I really am. So that's the brand that I use. And also, when I look at outlets or receptacles, if you will, I look at the shape of the face of them, so that when I take a three-prong plug and I go to plug it in, I'm looking for a shape that will receive that nicely, that I don't have to hunt around to get it to fit. They are like almost self-aligning, and that's one of the reasons why I like the Cooper Eaton brand compared to the Hubble brand. Another reason, because Hubble is almost flat across the face of the receptacles. I just don't like the way it looks, feels, nor works. So that's my little pro Cooper/Eaton endorsement.
Yeah, Eaton
Kyle?
has been a good company. Yeah, a good company for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about the gauge of wire? Something kind of simple. There's Romex, and Romex is the non-metallic wire. When we come back from this break, can we talk about how many amps? Well, the 14 gauge wire Romex will support, and how many amps 12 gauge, and they're different colors. And let's talk about the different colors. Some Romex is white, some is orange, some is yellow, some is black, some is gray. What does that mean? And let's talk about Ohm's law. Amps times volts equals what? You know, class, I'm not much on rules and regulations. I think, a lot of times I think they're suggestions. However, there's the National Electric Code, which I think is outstanding. I think it's really worth following in just about every respect. And one of the things that you learn if you read the National Electric Code, which I have, I got a copy of the book, and I bought that so I would be able to meet or exceed the National Electric Code when we built our farmhouse. One of the things I'd like to share with you is about wire. If you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, you'll see Romex wire. That's the non-metallic sheathed wire, and you'll see it in yellow, and you'll see it in kind of an orange and in gray and black and white. And these colors are for a specific reason. Now, they didn't used to be like this. Romex used to be white no matter what the size of the gauge of the wire was inside the sheath, but now it's different. So you can just look at the wire by the color of the sheath and know currently what the gauge of the wire is. So why don't we start with the white one, which is 14 gauge. Kyle Harris, tell us about what we need to know in terms of the gauge and the amp capacity of that white Romex colored wire, 14 gauge. What kind of capacity can that carry, and what's it used for?
Well, first of all, I'd say that, all of the different gauges of Romex all have a use. 14 is rated for 15 amps, and it's rated for to run for lighting, and you can actually run it for receptacles. They say in the code, if I remember correctly, it's like 10 receptacles you can run this to, because these little receptacles are rated for 15 amps if you get the cheapy ones. I don't use 14 for receptacles. I do use and did use 14 for like wiring my shop, because I have all LED lights except for one little 4-foot 2-bulb fluorescent that's right above my workbench. But if I turn on every single light in my shop, which there is 11 of them, plus the little 2-tube fluorescent, if I remember correctly, when I added that up, it come out to a total of 195 watts, which is like an amp and a half. So, right. The 14, it has its uses if you know that what you're going to use is not going to pull much amperage, in my opinion. If I were running, halogen lights up there that were, 1,000 watts apiece, there's no way, of course, I would run 14 wire to it. I wouldn't even run 14 to it just for one light. I would, take the 20 amp, number 12, or bigger, even 10, if I was going to group a bunch of these together. But anyway, that's the 14 has its uses in many, many respects. It's really easy to handle. I just don't like it for receptacles because people will. I just heard, this is a true story, Vince. This guy I know was just telling me that he was helping a friend of his out, and he pulled out a counter, and behind this counter was a receptacle that the guy had a plug-in strip plug on it, and it had every single one of those little plug-ins on the strip plug were plugged in, except one of them went to another strip cord, another little fused strip cord. He had two of them. So he had 10, I think there was 8. He had 8 different things running off of one receptacle behind this counter. So people do that kind of stuff, and they just don't know. It's a sad thing, and it's a serious thing, because that when you put that kind of load on one receptacle, you're just asking for heat buildup in a fire is what you're really asking for. Especially you run 14 wire to that, and run TVs and computers and all of those different things at one time. You're just asking for trouble.
Yep. So, class, the white Romax current production is going to be 14 gauge wire, rated at 15 amps. Now, how many watts is that? Well, amps times volts. Amps times volts equals watts. We'll tell you a little bit more about that when we come back. Class, Kyle Harris is with us, and we're talking about do-it-yourself wiring and making some changes and some things that we think you might want to know about. And I'm in total agreement. Kyle and I have not prepared for this broadcast at all. We haven't talked about, there are no notes. There's no notes to this, and we're just telling you what we think, and we are in total agreement. As a matter of fact, as much as I like Kyle Harris, I've never met him. I want to, but we haven't met in person, just on the phone. Isn't that interesting that we agree on everything we've discussed so far? And so I wanted to share with you that there are these electrical boxes that are blue, and they're made by a company called Carlon, and I suggest you get the ones that are a little bit bigger than the very inexpensive ones. So instead of, let's say, what used to cost 18 cents, I don't know what they cost now, but for maybe 10 cents more, you can get a slightly larger one. It'll be much easier to work with. And the 10 cents, I think you'll appreciate that once you start using the larger boxes. I have not switched back to the smaller ones since I had a chance to work with those slightly larger ones. But, Kyle, something else I do. If I nail the 2 nails in that are on the sides of those boxes to install them, but I also take 1 or 2 sheetrock screws, and I also screw them from the inside with a real long Phillips bit so that they are even more secure. And if I am doing old work, meaning if I'm adding a receptacle or a box or a switch to an area where I have to cut a hole in the sheetrock, I can buy what's called an old work box, which is more expensive, or I can cut the nails or take the nails out, cut the little tabs off that hold the nails on what's called a new work box, which is much less expensive, and I can use 2 screws, sheetrock screws, from the inside and screw them to the studs. So I've done that. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I've done exactly the same thing, Vince. It's really it's interesting, that you and I have talked off air, and so many things from gardening to animal husbandry to automobiles and everything. It's like it's like we were brought up, like my brother from another mother kind of thing,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. We were talking about, well, how do you know how many watts something is? So let me tell you, class. A kilowatt is 1,000 watts. And a kilowatt running for 1 hour, 1,000 watt consumption for 1 hour is a kilowatt hour. And that's what you are charged for on your electric bill. Now, in our neck of the woods in Missouri, it's about 10 cents. So 1,000 watts for 1 hour or 1 kilowatt hour costs 10 cents. Now, how much does the device consume in terms of watts? Well, you simply multiply the number of amps that it says that device consumes by the number of volts. And if it has a standard plug, you can figure out 120 volts. So if it says 1 amp, you multiply 1 times 120 volts, and you'll come up with 120 watts. That's 1.2 cents if you're paying 10 cents per kilowatt, 1.2 cents per hour. So that's how you can tell about how much something will cost. Now, what I'd like Kyle to share with you, if it's okay with you, Kyle, is how you determine the current carrying capacity in watts of, let's say, 12-gauge wire. Now, 12-gauge wire is rated at 20 amps. 14-gauge wire is rated at 15 amps. So 12-gauge wire at 20 amps will carry 2,400 watts. Absolute maximum capacity. But I'm sure you don't ever load your circuits to 2,400 watts, do you?
Never do. In fact, I want to bring something to the class's attention that they may not know. This last winter, we had some ice build up on the corner of our roof, and when it started melting, because we had all kinds of snow this last year, it started melting a little bit, and it started dripping down in between my deck and my house. And it got there's a little entryway to the house, and it sort of got that wet. And I didn't realize it was actually going into the house and getting downstairs just a little bit. It was starting to make the floor wet and the area down in there. So I went up there and took care of it on the roof first, and then I put a little electric heater up close to where the water were, so it would dry out. And I put it up, plugged it into a 15 amp receptacle, and I put it on 1,000. Because most of the little electric heaters are either 1,000 or 1,250 or 1,500 watts. And I just put it on 1,000 because I was planning on leaving it, and I did not want to pull even 1,000 watts, definitely not 1,500 for a very long period of time, even though the receptacle is rated for 1,800, and there's 14-gauge wire already in this house that I'm in. So I knew how we were sitting. But so I used a 14-gauge extension cord to be able to get down to it. Well, a couple of hours later, I thought, I'm going to go down there and check on that. So the place I check is the connection between the heater and your extension cord, because that connection is where you have the transfer of electricity. It's also going to have I don't care how they say it, you're going to have a slight air gap, and the heat is going to be right there. And that little plug was hot, even using 14 gauge. And so I went and got a heavier gauge, 12-gauge wire that was a shorter extension cord, and I put that in there and made the tongs on the little plug-ins on the heater, kind of spread them out a little bit so it'd make a really tight connection, and that took care of that problem. But even with that 14 gauge at 1,000, it was still enough to heat that connection up by itself.
So what you're bringing up is a very good point. What you're bringing up. So, class, if you look at 14 gauge wire, that would be 15 amp wire times 120 volts is current carrying capacity of 1,800 watts. But it'll get hot. And so what we recommend is never load more than 80%. So that 15 amp wire, which is 14 gauge, should only be loaded at the absolute maximum of 1440 watts. Now, Kyle did that. He took a 1440 watt wire and it got hot at the connection. Now, here's what you should think about. There are wires in your wall that don't have a lot of air around them, moving air to keep them cool. And if you're loading circuits, or if you're overloading circuits, those wires may get too hot, and, well, most of what's around those wires is combustible. That would be dust. Over the years, dust gets into those wall cavities. You've got wood in there, and you've got maybe the plastic on the wire. All of that is combustible at some temperature. So what do we recommend? Don't overload those circuits. Now, that means that if you have circuit breakers, you can look at the wire in the circuit breaker panel, and you can see if it's easily, you can determine, once you get a feel for it, whether you have 12 gauge wire or 14 gauge wire or what gauge wire you have. And you can look at where that wire goes into the circuit breaker, and you can say, wait a minute, I've got a 20 amp circuit breaker on a 15 amp wire. 14 gauge wire is 15 amps. And you'll then realize that you need to change that breaker, because you need to not put a larger breaker on a wire than it can handle. Because if you do, that wire will get hot if you overload it, and you can cause a fire. So that is one thought. Another thought is a thing called a kilowatt, KILL-A-WATT. I have one in the kitchen, and sometimes when we have guests here, I'll let them try it and plug it in. You plug this into an outlet, and then you plug a device in it. If you have a coffee maker, you can plug the coffee maker in there, and you hit a little button. It'll tell you how many volts that outlet is currently at. 121, 122, 122.4. It'll tell you. And when you power up that appliance that's plugged into the kilowatt meter, it will tell you how many watts that device is drawing. And you're probably going to be in for a shock at how much some of these devices use, like a toaster, yeah. Or if you have a device with a little electric motor, you'll find out that when these motors start up, they draw 2 or 3 times the amount of watts that they use when they are then stable a few seconds later. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Vince. And there's an old saying, and I've said it before on the air, that, if you live off the grid or you are in a position where you're trying to prepare for emergencies, always find out the amps, because you will live and you will die by the amp. So anything that creates heat is anathema. It's terrible for off the grid living. And never ever wire anything into into any kind of system, electronics, or off of a generator, or off of anything that does not have a circuit breaker to protect it. And then make sure that you oversize the wire, and I oversize the receptacle as well, just in case. Because, if you figure you put something in and it's going to last 10 years, and if you're 60 now and able to do that, at 70, when that thing fails, you might not be able to. So think down the line, so that if you get yourself in, or you get hurt or something and you can't bend over, to be able to work on something. So when you put something in, put it in there so that you're not going to have to come back in all likelihood.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And by the way, that's what I'm doing. I'm changing out the wiring, reorganizing it, I should say, in our breaker panels, because I've installed a new breaker panel, which is the main new breaker panel, and I'm using all the existing panels and sub-panels for our inverter load. I'll tell you a little bit about that when we come back. Class, Kyle Harris is with us, and he is our electrical wiring instructor. He's our electrician instructor. I mentioned Kilowatt, Kill-A-W-A-T-T. It's a device you can buy. Look it up on the internet. It's about $20. Okay. And I wanted to share very quickly, white Romex wire is 14 gauge, which is normally used for ceiling type lighting circuits. Yellow is 12 gauge, which is for 20 amp circuits. Those are general wiring circuits. You can use that for wall receptacles, and also you can use it for ceiling lights. Orange is typically, orange is the 10 gauge wire. It's heavier. It will handle up to, and we're talking about copper now, 30 amp loads. And then black would be typically for 6 and 8 gauge wire. So you can look that up at your leisure. I wanted to share with you our thoughts about metal boxes versus plastic boxes. Now, originally I thought plastic boxes were the way to go until I took out the tri-field meter and I realized that, wow, when you start separating these wires outside the Romex sheath, they tend to emit more electromagnetic radiation. Plastic boxes are great because they don't conduct electricity, and there's less likelihood of a short inside one of these boxes to the boxes, and if they're plastic. But metal a little more difficult to work with. They cost a little bit more, but they contain on all sides but the front more of the electromagnetic radiation. And here's something that I learned. I needed a 6-gang box. That meant 6 switches all in the same box. How much do they cost? Between $15 and $20 for plastic. I thought, no, I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. That's really way, way overpriced. So I found that you can get 1-gang boxes that are gangable, meaning you can take out one side cover, take out one screw, take out the side cover, and gang them together. And they're about $2 a piece for deep metal boxes. So I was able to get them for $2 a piece, metal boxes. So 6 times 2 is $12. So I actually saved money and got metal boxes. Kyle, what are your thoughts? Metal versus plastic boxes?
Well, Vince, I did not know about containing the electromagnetic pollution that you were talking about, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I always use in commercial applications or where there is any potential where, the box is not behind a wall, where it's actually exposed. I like to use nothing but metal, and then I make sure that the wires are run up and out of the way so that people can't hook them or anything like that, like in a garage. Sometimes people don't insulate their garage. So, but I like metal boxes for that, for garages. But pretty much everything else, I like. I pretty well just stay with plastic because there's a balance between time spent fighting some of them metal boxes, getting them together. You probably know what I'm talking about, and the ease of running together with the plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Kyle, one of the things that I do, I'd like to get your opinion on this. Whenever possible, when I put wires into a box, whether it be plastic or metal, I try to put the wires in from the bottom. And the reason I do that is if I want to knock out one of those knockout holes in a box, I know that there's going to be dust that will settle in it over the years just from it being in the wall. And I'd rather minimize that dust getting in the box and causing problems later on. I try to just put all the wires that I'm going to use for boxes in from the bottom. And I put a drip loop in there so that if there is any moisture, it will drip down the wire, drip to the drip loop, and not go upward into the box. Do you do the same thing?
I have done that many times. I can't say I always do it, but most of the time that's the best way to do it by far.
There you go, class. So Kyle and I have agreed on everything in terms of wiring. Kyle, have you ever soldered wires inside a box when you join them together? Connections in the box. Have you ever soldered them?
If I know they're going to be subjected to intermittent high amperage, I will definitely solder them.
There you go. I do the same thing, class. So, class, you've just learned our thoughts on do-it-yourself wiring. Kyle Harris has been with us for this hour, and you might want to share this with friends and family. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.